Mike.
I'm Brad.
And this is Ministry Chemistry.
Here we go.
Welcome back to another episode of Ministry Chemistry. Do you know what we have not done in this new year?
No.
We really haven't talked politics. We've talked leadership in ministry.
We talk celebrities.
We talked celebrities, but
Isn't that basically the same thing, though, in this day and age?
No, it's not.
I mean, if you watch the Golden Globes or the Oscars, you can't talk celebrity without talking politics.
Well, I mean, they have politics about them, but we have not
good.
done any kind of focus on, the current state of our president or those running in opposition to him who want to be president. And I think it's,
there's so many.
It's about time we do this.
They're trying to whittle it down.
So, fair warning, listeners. Today is the day we're going to talk a little bit about politics and politicians with a great Springboard article.
Yeah.
That Mike shared with us. Mike, what's the article?
So the title of the article is, "Will Somebody Please Hate My Enemies for Me?" And then the subtitle, "Donald Trump is making it even harder for Christians to defend him, and yet they still do." So
Donald Trump is making it hard for Christians to still defend him.
And yet they still do.
And yet they still do. Okay.
So this is not, obviously it's not an attack on anyone. We are not attacking anyone.
No.
Maybe the article is somewhat. It's a really good article. We'll attach it to our Facebook and social media for people to actually read it themselves. But the article comes on the heels of the National Prayer Breakfast.
That's right.
That was the context of the article. And basically, I think it was a pastor, I can't remember, but essentially got up and shared some words of Jesus. And, the whole message was, love your enemies.
Pray for those who persecute you.
Right.
Direct quoting of
right.
Jesus, our Lord and Savior.
And the article quotes Trump as getting up literally right after this person and saying, I don't necessarily agree with that. And then goes into attacking his enemies.
Of course he does.
Who have, obviously the prayer breakfast. I think the prayer breakfast was like the same week as the acquittal.
Yeah.
Yes.
So it was like acquittal, then the State of the Union, and then the prayer breakfast, all within a 3 or 4 day span.
Yes.
So, the article, I think the article kind of, it's not really attacking per se people who defend Trump. I think the author does a pretty good job of, you can support whoever you want to support, but here's the reason why I don't.
I agree. I thought the article was balanced in that.
Yeah,
we're
I
not
think
going to
so.
hyper-focus. We're not going to call out anyone. We are going to, not anyone, but we are going to call out a thing that exists and has existed for 4 years, which is this stance of, it's kind of like an opposite stance to hate the sin, love the sinner.
Yeah.
Because this is love the politician, hate his politics, or love his politics, disagree with the politician. It's this odd existing faction of Christians who are like, well, because he's this way, we're just going to ignore that because he's doing these things. And those are the good things we want done.
Well, I would say the article goes even one step further than we're going to ignore that. And he almost
ignore what he does.
Yeah, he almost makes
personally.
the case that since so many people felt like they had to jump on politics regardless of the person, that they've become so engrossed in that they almost come to defend the person, whereas they may not have previously. And I think there's a good argument for that.
Absolutely. And we're watching this play out. Not just on a social media page or the pages of newspapers and magazines, but I think in our own homes and friend circles and definitely churches. I'm a fan of a pastor teaching Jesus always, and where Jesus's message overlaps with something I need to actively engage in societally or politically, I think that's important. But Jesus's message gets elevated above, in this case, Trump's message. And I think people are forgetting that. I think there's a large amount of Christians forgetting that or mixing up the two.
Yeah, it's interesting as you say that, because I think like within our friend circle right here, if there's something that any one of the three of us did that the other two did not feel was Christ-like, we would shed
Call it out
light
quick.
on that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I
Like, hey,
rely on that.
I don't really feel like your behavior is very Christ-like.
Yes.
And part of what the article is calling out is people excuse behavior that is knowingly unchristlike because of the person, and maybe even more so the platform.
The platform.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's really interesting.
Which,
to
when
me.
you look at the opposing platform, we're also recording this after presidential candidate Bernie Sanders has basically said anyone who takes the stance of pro-life is not welcome in our party or on our platform. And there again, it's a singular topic, a singular issue being highlighted, and it's caused quite the ruckus. Because what are you doing? You're saying if you believe in this way politically, you are not welcome here. And it's fascinating. It's fascinating to watch it unfold. Because there are Christians who would say, actually, I'd prefer that to be my stance. But now you've just said I can't be a part of your party.
Right.
Yeah. Well, it's
So it's not limited to the Republicans, I guess is what I'm saying.
no. It's not. I mean, I think how it's laid out has become a little unique to Trump.
Yes.
Trump is a blunt object. Like he just someone described him as a hammer looking for a nail. Sometimes it will hit the nail on the head, and sometimes it will come crashing through a wall and destroy everything in its path.
Your
And
thumb.
that's fairly accurate. When you listen to him talk and stuff like that. Bernie is probably a little bit more political. That's not the right adjective to use. He's a little bit more polished in
Yes.
his political speech, and Trump doesn't seem to care.
But even then, and I wondered this back when McCain was running, to your point of we would hold you accountable, you guys would hold me accountable, right? We all have wise counsel. I think wise counsel is one of the greatest gifts of this faith that highlights and says, hey, you've got Jesus, you've got the word of God, and you also should seek wise counsel, right? You should seek that group that's going to love you well enough to tell you truth, even when it's harsh. And so I look at these folks running and I'm like, who's your wise counsel? And are you ignoring them, or are they not wise, or what's going on? What's your end game? Because Trump has essentially, he's won his end game. He's president. He probably will be president for the next 4 years. What was Bernie Sanders' end game when he said that on his platform? When I say John McCain, I wondered who his wise counsel was when he asked Sarah Palin to be his running mate. Because McCain could have beaten President Obama until his running mate was chosen and opened her mouth. And this isn't a comment on Sarah Palin necessarily. It probably sounds like it, but she may have been a great governor of Alaska. But as a vice presidential running mate with no national political experience,
Yeah.
that was his downfall. So who was your wise counsel?
Well, obviously there was a tactic there. It's the going after the female vote.
Yep.
And she was politically inexperienced, but attractive. She had some gaffes, but she was fairly well spoken.
But even think about that. It was going after the female vote. But that's like
for
saying,
sure.
if we give you a female, females will vote. That's so condescending.
Well,
Women aren't just going to vote for a woman because she's a woman.
not necessarily.
Really?
Not necessarily.
No.
Not all women, but do you speak for all women?
No, I do not.
Yeah, I'm not.
Nor do I speak for all Democrats or Republicans, because it's the same blanket statement, right? If it's a Republican, I'm checking the R box all the way down the column. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
Do you know what some of those R's say, or what some of those D's say? D for Democrat, by the way, just in case anyone is confused.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's sad to me that it's not person over party. That somewhere along the line, that has been lost, or maybe it never truly existed in a
Well, it's
majority
interesting.
form.
Brad, you may have been the one that said this. Somebody said this recently, that we will probably never see a devout follower of Christ in the White House because of what it takes to get there.
Right.
Can you be a true follower of Christ in all the sense that we think that means, and actually get there? You know?
The other part of that is not only do I not think we'll get a devout Christian in the White House, I don't know that you'll ever get, and I think I've said this before, we'll never get the best candidate or person in the White House. We'll get the most electable person.
Yeah.
They're either off the charts one way or the other, or they can draw enough attention. They can tick off the right amount of people to get elected. But once they're in there, it's like, what is the platform? Because not as much is really that I think matters to people is getting done. It's just, hey, we needed to get that old party out. It's so divisive that we need to get that old party out. And it doesn't matter necessarily what gets done or what the process is.
Or the progress made. Or,
right.
Yeah. Why do you think a devout Christian will never be president? And I'm going to define devout Christian as someone who espouses the teachings of Jesus. So open up those Bibles to Matthew 5, 6, and 7. Let's look at those Beatitudes. Let's talk about what we're called to do and who we're called to elevate. And if someone ran on that platform, why do you think they would not get elected? Who's stopping that?
Well, I would. When is the last election? Let's say presidential. Let's keep it that. But you could probably go all the way down to, city council. Tell me an election where there hasn't been mudslinging in the campaigning process.
So they'd have to run an entirely clean campaign, essentially.
Is that possible? Is it possible to get elected when you have to be as completely clean as possible? And when I say completely clean as possible, that merely means, okay, all I'm going to do is talk about what I want to accomplish while I'm in office, and worst case scenario, maybe point out some facts about the other candidate that are not in line with my values and what I want to espouse while I'm in office. I wouldn't consider that mudslinging. I would consider that just you're giving a clear picture of this is the difference between me and option
and
B.
them, sure.
Right.
However, it seems like every time we get to election time, we will be bombarded with the advertisements, and every commercial break, it's this candidate and then followed up by their opponent, and they are saying the exact same things about each other. I am for this, against this. My opponent is against this, and apparently not for anything. But then the next commercial comes and it's the opposing person, and they're saying the exact opposite that the person just said before. And so how can you know what is true?
Right.
Is there truth? Well, there is truth, but nobody seems to be giving it in a way that people can make a decision on their own.
And here's what President Trump's going to be able to do. I said I would do this, and this got done.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you said on a previous podcast the percentage. I mean, it's like
it's crazy high.
90%
Yeah.
or something.
And I think the pushback is twofold. One, those in opposition will say, we never wanted that done. And those in favor will say, yep, look what he did. He did what he said he'd do. And the second piece of opposition is just the process by which he did some things. The third piece of opposition, which has nothing to do with what he did or didn't do, is just how he is as a human. And I think that's what this article hits on.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
100% is, we're not talking about what he has been able to accomplish and by what means he's been able to accomplish it. Just when you look at the man who holds the seat and the office of president, how are you as a Christian saying, I support this man? Not just the actions that he is responsible for.
This kind of ties back into our last conversation about the art versus the artist.
And being starstruck. Are you starstruck over the president?
No, you made the case though that you're able to separate that.
Yeah.
Even if you ran into your favorite actress and she was terrible, you would still be able to watch a show or movie or whatever and not really factor that in.
Yeah, well, and
Just shows how good of an actress she is.
we were
Yeah.
talking before the recording. Joaquin Phoenix gave a pretty out there speech at the Oscars. I think some would say it was very out there.
This guy would.
Yeah. When he's talking about the cow's milk and that we have the ability to make milk that we don't need from a cow that's then stolen from her calf. I think I quoted that pretty directly. And yet some might argue he's the greatest actor of the generation. So
Some might.
art versus artist, president versus...
Well, what I'm getting at though is you are able to do that.
I am,
I'm
yes.
not as much. That's why I don't watch the Oscars and the Golden
Yeah.
Globes, because I don't want to hear the real person spout off at the mouth about stuff that I don't think they have any business talking about, because I like to watch their movies. So, but what I'm getting at though is, does the same principle apply to politics?
No. And I'll tell you why.
I would say no too, but I think there are Christians who do separate that, and that's their defense of supporting Trump. Is he does everything that I want him to do that falls in line with my Christian values politically, even though he can project himself as a terrible person.
Well, and the difference is, and here's the difference for me, acting, music, entertainment, those forms of expression typically exist in a very fictional realm, a very imaginative realm, non-effective to people's daily lives realm. Politics, politicians, policies, that's nonfiction. That's real life. That's work that affects real people in ways that aren't choices. So I get taxed. I'm going through tax season. You get taxed. Those aren't choices. We must submit taxes. We must either pay or be paid by the government. This is a law that exists in our land. I have a choice whether or not to see Joaquin Phoenix as the Joker, right?
But I feel like you're meshing the two.
Ooh, how?
Okay. Does Trump's Twitter feed have anything to do with his policies?
Yes.
Do they?
Yes.
Yeah. So basically, what you're saying though is that Trump spouting off about his hatred for Nancy Pelosi on Twitter impacts you personally.
Maybe not me personally, but it affects us as a nation, absolutely. Because when did you watch the State of the Union?
It affects other people's views of us as Americans, because I think
Which affects our country standing in the world.
yeah. I mean,
And I don't separate it because when I
someone
watched, I didn't
argue-
watch the State of the Union, but I did see the opening scene where President Trump extended his hand to be shook, and Nancy Pelosi did not shake his hand.
the opposite.
It was the opposite.
The opposite. Nancy Pelosi extended her hand. President Trump didn't shake it, but then at the end, she tore up her copy of the State of the Union, right? This is the debased adult actions that are existing. Now, people praised both. I wouldn't have shook her,
Shook.
whatever the word is. Yeah, I
Have
wouldn't have
shook.
shook her hand
Will
either.
shake.
And I would have torn up the piece of paper as well, right? We praise and laud these, but then I have to go, I'm a heart person, right? What's the heart behind all that? The heart behind Joaquin Phoenix playing the Joker is a great example. Doesn't mean he's actually a homicidal maniac. The heart behind tearing up the State of the Union or refusing to shake a hand, there's a heart behind that. And there's a process affected by the heart behind that.
That's fair.
That's fair, but I'm going to push back again.
Great.
All right. Assume the absence of TV and social media just for a minute. I know that's a
Okay.
foreign concept to us.
It is, yeah.
Okay. So since
childhood.
and this applies to all presidents. We don't just have to focus in on Trump. With any president, once they're in office for a certain period of time and they've really, the first 100 days is a big milestone. but really, like, you didn't really start to feel the impact of Trump's policies and governing probably for about 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
But
Until he was done firing people.
yeah, he's still not done with that. But anyway, I'm just saying, like, in your everyday life, there, like, let's take, for instance, and I'm not going to weigh in on which side I lean on this, but the tax bill.
Okay.
Everyone felt the impact of that in one way or the other.
Right.
Like that is a noticeable difference.
Correct.
You know, for some people good, some people maybe not.
Right.
But you feel that regardless of headlines or 24-hour news cycle or social media.
Okay.
That's the argument that I'm making.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
Because if I lived in a vacuum and I didn't turn my TV on and I wasn't on my phone, I couldn't care less about the person, because the policies are what impact me.
And at the core of voting is just that.
Ooh, I would totally disagree with that. 100%.
No.
I think most people go to the ballot box based on their Twitter feed and what they watch on the news, more so than the policies, other than the pro-life versus pro-choice thing. I mean, that one's kind of glaringly
I don't
evident.
think so. I think there was an electability factor because of healthcare. I think there's been an electability factor because of your policy on national defense. I think there's an electability factor based on the environment. I mean, I'm talking to people who vote based on these singular issues. There's an electability factor based on economic prosperity or not. There's an electability factor based on immigration reform alone, especially in this day and age, and especially after the policies that the Trump administration has instigated.
Your friend circle must be much smarter than the average voter going to the ballot box. And I don't want to offend anyone listening. I'm just saying, let's just be real. The presidency is a popularity contest.
No.
Absolutely.
Yeah, not in my
it
friend
is.
circle. In my friend circle, it's what's the benefit of this individual's decision.
Maybe in your
to
friend
me.
circle, but would you say more broadly?
I don't know otherwise.
Let me give you a backup for this. The reason I believe 100% it is.
Because it's either that for me, or it's I'm a Republican, I've always voted Republican, or I'm a Democrat and I've always voted Democrat. Those are the two options for me. Yeah, give me a third
Well,
option.
Here's a glaring example of why I believe the presidency is a popularity contest. Okay, I just went to the Reagan Library, which was amazing. But there's a replica in every presidential library of the Resolute desk. If you've ever watched National Treasure, you've seen the Resolute desk.
Or the West Wing.
Or the West Wing, you've seen the Resolute desk. Okay.
You're welcome.
Once television, campaigning, and presidential speeches became popular on television, they put the front cover on the Resolute desk to hide the fact that FDR was in a wheelchair.
Yeah.
That was the whole purpose of it. That was built afterwards. Because they knew that a handicapped president would impact people's views and his popularity. To me, that's a glaring example of how the presidential race is a popularity contest.
You don't think it was his policies?
I mean, I'm not saying that's
This
completely
man
absent.
is starting to get us out of the Great Depression. We should give him another 4 years to continue that work.
You're making me bite my tongue again.
Go ahead.
And I really hate that.
Go
I'm just gonna
ahead.
bite it off. Just bite it off. I'm not saying that people are ignorant of that. People know, people knew that, Trump was, I mean, he said he was going to be pro-life and he's going to put pro-life judges. People say I voted for Trump because of that alone, and we have 2 new judges on the bench, whatever. That wasn't like the 100% reason they voted for Trump.
No.
And that's the case that David French makes in this article is people voted for Trump because he was a blunt object. And it was the classic case of the enemy of my enemies is my friend. And it was, there was this,
and in
this
that case,
became this hatred for the other side.
I was going to say, in that case, it's not a popularity contest of we like Trump. It's a we hate you.
Yeah.
And he's the other guy.
But the same thing
We like him
applies.
better than you.
Yeah, the
we'll
same thing
tolerate
applies.
him.
That's still a popularity contest. It's just the unpopular side. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I'm voting for this guy, not necessarily because
Okay.
I like him so much, but because I
I hate
dislike
you.
this other side
Right.
so much. And he's going to attack you in a place where I can't. I'm incapable of that. So I'm going to give him the platform to do it for me. That's the case the article's making.
Which is just fascinating.
But we see
And this
that
is who
play
we are.
out.
Yeah.
We all know
Yeah.
people who are staunch Trump supporters.
So doesn't it make, yeah, we do. And doesn't it make, and staunch adversaries, if they could be, to Trump, right?
Yeah.
Staunch, I cannot believe he's in office and we must do everything to get him out. The problem is, in the direction it's headed right now, you got Bernie Sanders, who's blowing Elizabeth Warren out of the water, by the way. In the two, I get it. It's just been Iowa and New Hampshire, but she's not even in top 3.
She got smoked in a border state.
Yeah.
So that's probably not very good.
Yeah.
So it's not the way that I think social media has led us to believe it's going to go. Can he beat Trump? I think his policies scare more people who are Trump supporters, and that fear-based mentality, it's preying on people's fears. And we're going to see it play out more and more over the next many months.
Yep.
And become more divisive and more separate.
One of the interesting things to me, and I hope we get a chance to talk about it again, Brad's idea from previously about whether or not we'll see a devout Christian in the White House. Mike Pence seems to represent that as well as anyone we've seen in a while. But does his attachment to Trump deter his capability of carrying on that legacy? Because I don't think he would, I don't think he would preside in the same way that Trump has.
No.
If he gets elected and carries on Trump policies, I don't think he would carry himself the same way. He hasn't proven that he would.
No.
But, you could argue, has he sacrificed some of his values in defense of someone who obviously doesn't carry some of those same values?
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you, talk about shared values. Kindness, if we just look at the value of kindness, Ellen got lambasted because she was sitting in the same box as former President George W. Bush. And her response was, why wouldn't I be kind to someone? And the pushback was, do you know what he did? Do you know what this policy did and this policy did and this policy did? How can you sit there and sit next to someone who said these policies were okay in the time that he was president? And her response was, because why would I be unkind? Like, my value that I uphold is kindness towards all. And you know what? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't care who the president was that was sitting there. Every president has made decisions around policies that every person in America can say, I disagree with that. Nobody fully supported every single thing President Obama did. No one fully supported every single thing Reagan did. These extremists or these people that we uphold post their presidency, and everyone says Trump will go down as one of the worst presidents in history. By whose account?
Right.
Yeah.
And this is not me being a Trump supporter. Please hear me. That's not it. But it is me saying there is no president that has been 100% someone you would say everything they've done and all the being that they are, I'm 100% for.
That's the rub, and that's the pushback I would give to an article like this. And again, we'll post it so everyone can read it themselves. Show me a presidential candidate that is morally the person that I would uphold value-wise and has the policies that align with those values, and I would vote for that person 10 times out of 10. When's the last time we've seen that?
Yeah.
And that's the rub, and that's where people are like, hey, I support this guy knowing what he is because you haven't given me a better option.
Brad, would you want President Bartlett to be our president if he could really exist in real life?
Who's Bartlett?
Oh, he's the president on The West Wing, the show you've never watched.
Yeah. That show that Brad's watched more times than I
Stop
can.
it. I've stopped watching because of you guys.
You shouldn't.
I know. I think I would, just because when you really get to know the character, quote unquote, you see more of who he is and why he does the things he does. If that were possible to get to know a candidate like that, yeah.
Right.
But I don't think we're going to see what they put out.
That's right.
And we're going to see what they want us to see. And that's never going to happen
So
just organically.
here's the questions for you this week, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. How do you decide who you're going to vote for and how you're going to vote? Is it policies, politicians? Is it how it affects you? Is it the person behind the platform? Question 1. Question 2. Do you believe a devout Christian could ever actually run for a larger office, such as the presidency of the United States?
And is that you?
And truly win hearts. And Brad wants to know, is that you? What is
Hurry up
activism?
and run.
What is the gospel of Jesus, and what is the message that we are truly uplifting when we support some of these folks who make the decisions for our states, countries, and communities? For Ministry Chemistry, I'm Renee.
Still Mike.
And Brad.
We'll talk to you next time.